In compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act, the notice requirements have been satisfied. Meeting dates for the year are listed in the annual agenda. Copies are sent to the Record, Suburbanite, and Northern Valley Press and are posted on the public bulletin board in the lobby of the Municipal Center. The notice of this special regular meeting via the March 8th Sunshine Notice has been sent to the Record, Suburbanite, and Northern Valley News and has been posted on the public bulletin board in the lobby of the Municipal Center and the Borough website. We just have two items that are to be considered. They're both the municipal budget. The first is the review with our borough auditor. We are honored to have his presence tonight.
Honored to be here, Mayor. Thank
Good to see you.
Yep, nice seeing you too. Okay, so I think I sent everything out today, Susan. Does everybody have the handouts?
Is this one?
Okay, yeah, I mean, we can go through this, just give you a kind of an overview. I know when we were here, I guess it was about a month ago, we had talked about looking at the budget. Right, thank you, yes. And kind of going through that and seeing whether or not there was a possibility of coming in with a very low or even a zero increase, right? And we all talked about that was the plan. But certainly we couldn't mandate it. But you know, it just kind of works out that way sometimes. And it's nice to come here and actually be able to present something to you that shows a zero tax increase without jeopardizing the future. And that's what I always look at. And you know, you've heard that speech many, many times. You can put the tape back in on me.
I don't know why you can't do it every year.
Jersey City just did it 5 years in a row.
Yeah, but Jersey City's a little bit
It's a different,
in so many different ways.
You talk about the redevelopment and all the special
We had millions and
pilots they
millions of
have.
dollars of redevelopment. But we'd have an easier time with it too.
You
And they
would.
have their problems, unfortunately.
You would. So, you know, what precipitated here that allows us to do this? Well, first of all, you know, 2017 was a very good year. When I say that, just to kind of give you a big recap, a big picture view of it, you know, when we looked at 2018, surplus is up now to a level of 4.6 million from roughly 4 million the year before, which is tremendous. What really led to that? A lot of that has to do, as we just discussed, is really the assessed values and property values and new buildings and construction, redevelopment. So what happened is that in 2017, you had added taxes, and most of the added taxes dropped to the bottom line on the municipal level, okay, except for the county. So we have to give the county their share, but the school's not part of that sharing process. The rest of it comes here. We were almost $1 million that we dropped on added taxes in 2017. I'll give you, for instance, the year before was a little less than $500,000, okay? So the assessed values are trending up, and that's really dropping a lot of money into the bottom line. So our assessed value, when you look at 17 to 18, and 18 helps with the zero increase again too. So when you look from 17 to 18, the total assessed values in the borough went up $49 million, which is tremendous. That's approximately 1% on total value. That allows you to raise tax dollars of $236,000 without affecting an average home bill, tax rate. That's right. So that's a tremendous increase. The year before was only 29 million. So when you take all these things in there, just add it to more surplus, it look, you know, again, rosy going forward. Our surplus numbers add a number that's over, again, like I said, $4.6 million. So taking all that into account, and then when you look at the 2018 budget, again, globally, there weren't really a lot of line items that had significant changes. The biggest changes that we had was really that, obviously, police. We know police salaries is our biggest budget line, so that's always going to go up. We can't avoid that. But we had legal drop $143,000. So that helped.
Okay. My question is, you know, we best do this exercise in a conservative manner. So my concern now is not patting ourselves in the back for 2018. Where does it leave us for 2019? Let's assume that this spike in the increase in the tax base is just that, a spike. Let's say that the increase from 18 to 19, or during the 2018 year, is only 29 million, not up in the 40s again. So where does that leave us next year? Also, we have to take into account, we have a police contract coming up. We have an unknown amount of tax appeals. Do you still feel this kind, we started out by feeling great
Yeah.
about the zero this year. Are we in a position where a zero next year is a reasonable target?
I don't have that as a target. I can just tell you that. After working through the forecast model for 2019, and I will tell you that, as you know, especially if you know me from being here for a while, that I'm on the conservative side. So when I'm talking about forecasted numbers, I'm assuming that there's no increase in the assessed values, which probably isn't very realistic. But there were a couple of years when we had zero increases in assessed values going forward. I took all of that into consideration. Conservative on the revenue side, and again, a little more aggressive on what we're going to spend, especially salaries. We know we're going to go 2%. We know police 2% is never 2%. Okay? I mean, we all know that 2% really equates to between 4 and 5% on the police. We all know that because of step increases and whatnot. I factored
Longevity.
Yeah, longevity. I factored all of that into it. I'm looking at, again, a very, very conservative approach that we would look at about $126 increase next year, maybe $100 increase, somewhere in that, 2.5% increase.
That's a start, but that's with a zero increase, a zero amount of increase in tax base, or
Zero increase, yeah. I didn't
Zero
factor any of that into it, yes.
You mean, so your assumption is that the tax base will remain flat?
Constant, flat, that's correct.
Okay, so 2 years ago, or last year, it went up 29 million, this year it went up 48 million. So you're going zero.
I'm going zero.
So if, for argument's sake, we go back down to somewhere around 2029, that would change that bottom number, correct?
It would, and it would drop that 126 probably somewhere around 100. And
That's all?
Yeah, something like that, into that effect. Depending upon, again, are we going to look at a 40 million or 30 million or $25 million increase? There certainly will be some softening of it. I did make my assumptions. Even with these assumptions, my surplus number is at 4.6 now. I'm even suggesting that number is actually going to go up to 4.7. Again, so if things break right and we're in a situation where we have more collections again on addeds, that number certainly could drop again to the reasonableness where we were in the previous years, and that's somewhere around that $75, $80 increase, which is what we've had, which I did hand out on that 4-year analysis to give you guys an idea of where we've been and where we're going.
Yeah,
Questions, anybody?
yeah. First of all, can we have this electronically, please, in an electronic format?
I have it electronic.
Would you please? Thank you. Yeah, all right. I was looking over here, I couldn't see the reserves over here. Do you have it? I'm trying to find.
Max, which reserves? And I'll try to steer you.
Our reserves that, about the $4 million, 4.5.
Here.
Oh, he's talking about the same.
That'll be,
You're in which one?
Page 8 on a different document.
The borough.
Okay, Borough of Tenafly, okay, well, that's what, okay.
Page 8.
And we have this one electronically too? Thank you. All right,
Max,
good.
did you find my numbers?
I'm looking, I
page
was
8.
looking at, first, I was looking at the document that you talked about now. Are you gonna talk about this document now?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of did globally. I wasn't going to get into the detailing unless you want to go through the detail, but, I kind of did globally as to, how I came up with the forecasted numbers. So if you want, we can kind of walk through it a little bit.
Yes, please,
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to work off of this document.
yeah.
Are there extras, Max?
No, those are deliberative type documents.
Okay.
They cannot be given to the plebe till the whole
Right.
thing is done.
When is that?
Never. I'll give it to you after this
All
meeting.
right.
So page 2 of this actually gives you a snapshot. So you have some actual data, and you have the 18 budget as we're presenting it today with a 0% increase. So the tax rate on page 2 obviously stays the same as last year, the $595, $0 increase. And you can see really what's happened here is that the surplus, we went up from 1.9. We're going to use, $2.1 million. And as I indicated, on the appropriation side, not a lot of shifts in the changes there. The biggest one, again, the shift is going to be on the increase in the police side compared to last year's budget, and a decrease on the legal side. And what we talked about here is looking at 2019.
Yeah.
So 2018, we're giving you a zero tax increase. 2019, right now, again, I'm showing a 2.7 increase. And
It's a big difference.
yeah, it is.
That's based on zero growth, right?
It's based on zero growth, yeah.
But the surplus is the only one that you show growth.
Surplus is the only one, and I'll explain in a minute, because I
Okay.
still have surplus, even with the increase in growth of 2.25, I still have the surplus ending, projected to end at $100,000 higher than where we are today.
Yeah, and the miscellaneous should drop.
Yeah, again, listen, I can come back here with a forecast and be less conservative, give you something that's gonna be more aggressive. Listen, it's by nature where I prefer to come in, especially when I'm dealing with municipalities, to come in here and show you something that I feel is a conservative document.
Okay.
Because the last thing I wanna do is be aggressive with you and say, I'm gonna give you 0, and then next year I come in here and I have to say, oh, I made a mistake, I'm sorry, we're up 2%, and it's $125 an average home. And you say, well, what happened? You told us 0.
We just hang you, so no big deal.
Yeah, I'm trying to always look out for the future, and I think as you remember what I've always said in the past, is slow and steady wins the race. But I really do feel comfortable that you can get the 0 this year, and I think next year again will evolve. It's certainly going to be a fluid year again and a fluid document. But having said that, you can see that I've got this 126 here. When you go to page 3, it's just going through on the revenue side. And just big picture again, conceptually what I'm doing is I'm taking the revenues that we're forecasting for 2018 and just duplicating them for 19. No growth on the revenue side, okay? Except for the surplus, as we've indicated before. Then you go to page 4, and the rest of the pages, and these are, here you're looking at salaries and wages. Salaries and wages are simply forecasted taking the budgeted numbers
Can
for
you bear with me
18.
a second? I don't mean to be rude. You basically
page 2 or
are
3.
showing over here a decrease in tax revenues.
Next one,
Because
page.
you can't
Wait, you're
realize
talking
more
about,
than
page
what-
2?
It's page
What's your
3.
specific question?
You said
Page
this is
3.
down.
Total you show a
can't realize
decrease
more
in
than
miscellaneous
It's
revenues.
budget, we're looking budget to budget to budget,
Yeah, budget to budget to budget
Right.
for 2019.
correct.
And that's because you have specific worries, or I'm trying to understand what did you get over here that we,
Well, because as I indicated to you when I came in before, we talked about the additional added taxes that came through the year. So that $1 million is split partially through the current collections and partially through the...
stay with me for
Through the
revenue from
delinquencies.
delinquent taxes for the moment. Total miscellaneous revenues, you show a decrease. Let's not worry for the moment for the other taxes. You're showing a decrease from year to year on miscellaneous revenues. Do you have a specific worry about that you want to reduce because you reduce it? What's the,
Okay, so let me go back and try to explain that again.
yeah,
Okay. So there's a set formula on the delinquent taxes on the maximum amount that you can actually anticipate. And that's based on the collection percentage of the delinquencies times the remaining balance that you have in delinquencies. That's just a formula, maximum formula. The point that I'm trying to make is that when you look at the 2017 of 743,000,
yeah.
that's higher than normal because, as I indicated before, we had added taxes that were added as the year went through on the prior year. So we had over $1 million of added tax that came onto the roll, partially for prior years and most of it for the current year. So when the budget was developed, we didn't know that we were going to have the added taxes on the old years.
So my question was aligned
You know-
higher
So he
with
means this-
miscellaneous revenues.
That's because you cannot realize in the next year's budget more than what you anticipated in the
Oh, that's
previous
a
year's
rule?
budget.
It is a rule.
Okay, that's why you cannot,
It is a rule. That's
So
what
you have to
There's two
be, you're
things
on the
that-
side of conservatism, because if you budget this amount and it doesn't come in even, then you're not doing it
There's two
properly.
things to keep in mind is, one is, even with a decrease of over $200,000 in forecasted revenue from 18 to 17. Even with that decrease, we still came in at 0. And the end result is we most likely will have additional revenue coming in beyond what's on our budget.
Absolutely. And that's
Miscellaneous,
that's
That's
part
what
of,
you want.
well, listen, if you think about this though, it's just like a household income, right? If you think about the big picture.
No, I never get more money coming into my house.
And my wife doesn't project, she projects
I don't see it.
150% increase.
But the
So
good
let's spend it now.
news is, those increases that we will see will help us next year, correct?
That's exactly the point. And so think about it as a household income. So
Yeah.
what's happening is you're coming with a budget, right?
Yeah.
And surplus is the money in the bank. So I know that I'm budgeting, I'm gonna use $2.1 million of my bank, my cash on hand, right? To get me through the year.
Okay.
Because I have revenues coming in, but I don't have enough.
Yeah.
When I generate more revenues in that current year, that's just gonna add back to the surplus that I used. I used 2.1 million, I have to generate 2.1 million. Otherwise, you've got an increase in your tax rate without any spending on the appropriation side. So it's a delicate balance. So we have the usage, but I also wanna replenish. But we wanna be able to make sure that we can forecast going forward that I don't have spikes going up.
So
and
The
down.
advantage of being conservative is it gives us more room.
Gives you
And
flexibility
consistent.
always down to you.
And consistent in how we utilize our surplus.
Right.
You might want to tell, because Lauren's new, we generally don't use more than 50% of the surplus that we generate, and Jeff is new to it.
I have lots of questions on that for later.
Okay.
So my question though is, you didn't anticipate for 2017 having those additional. Is it a different law now or something different applying for 2018 that won't happen again? Or was that a unique year?
No, it's a matter of construction and new homes and new buildings being added. It's development.
If we could predict exactly how much construction is going to take place, it would be an exact science, unfortunately. But the good news is, when you drive down the streets, you still see people building.
Sure.
That's not
And we
happening.
have the 10
Right,
buildings
right.
coming up
Okay.
over there.
And the edits
Three.
don't really come about until the assessor says, okay, it's substantially complete. So
Right.
we will have completions in 2018
Sure.
where we'll have edits that we can't put them in now.
Can't predict.
since
We don't know.
We don't know
You
what they are,
don't-
so
you don't know.
you can't say. But we have to assume that we'll get. Well, we can assume, but the auditors can't say that we'll get a certain amount each year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Last year was a good year. The year before, I think, was an average year.
It was, and just to go back again, state statute on the revenue side, so all the revenues as a general rule, we're prohibited from anticipating more revenue in the subsequent year than we actually collected in the year before. Now think about it, it's the most conservative method of accounting.
Sure.
Everything's gotta be cash.
That's not
Okay.
how the government works.
That's how local
No,
government works in the state of New
That's not how the
Jersey.
state
We
and federal
can't
works.
work
That's
That's the
right.
way they make us work.
That's right. We're
And
gonna
that's
have
why we haven't had a
$1.5
bankruptcy.
billion deficit, but we're gonna make it up in.
So my question is, why wouldn't the numbers in 2018 and forecasted 2019 be the numbers in 2017?
Because you're looking at two different things, and that's why it's a little misleading.
saying? Why wouldn't you
I'm
just
giving
keep
you
it steady?
17 actual, not 17 budget.
Okay,
See, what was actually.
And 18 is going to be different.
right.
Correct.
Right.
What actually
I'm saying
happens
it
at
would
the
be
end of
exact.
18, and the beginning of 19 is going to be different than you see here.
So we're gonna look at 20 to 18.
What I could do
actual.
for you if you wanted, I could add a column, I can give you 17 budget,
Budget.
stick it in here, and we could do that in the office. It's
That
simple.
would be so good.
Because this is it's
I
a
just
tool
wanna
for
see what-
me to kind of
Yeah.
go through it,
Yeah.
but for you guys, it might be a
So is
little
it-
bit misleading.
Yeah,
Do we
it's
have-
a false,
curious-
Do we have the
because you'd
final-
say, oh, we could expect the same thing.
Do we have
It's not
the
necessary.
final actual revenues for 17
Yeah.
or is it still coming in?
That's this.
That's
We're done.
this.
That's
Alright,
it.
so
We're
then,
finished.
okay.
Okay, is
Yeah.
2017 atypical from the past couple of years? Or has it been steadily increasing?
It's been typical except for, again, the growth on the development side. I mean, that's where you're seeing the spike.
Okay,
That's where you're seeing the spike. And I can tell you, and if you think about when we were going through the 08, 09, and 10, I mean, that zero increases, and it was always putting pressure. Now, the beauty is that as the community grows its tax base, it helps everybody else on an average side. So what I will do is I will absolutely throw in the 2017 budget side for you.
Budget, yeah.
okay.
We know we're gonna have $14 million just from 53 Knickerbocker.
Because the rate was.
Huge
10 houses.
difference, huge difference.
10 houses at 1.4 mil, at least.
And that should be all completed in 2018?
Yeah, otherwise they're gonna start losing money. Here they don't.
Okay, any other questions for the auditor?
Yes.
Is this one yours too, or no?
That is, and I just threw that in there, and I didn't want to take the thunder away. I didn't realize that we had a representative here from Financial Advisors Group. Just FYI information for the mayor and council, so you guys can actually see what we did is just put a graph together, which shows how much are you actually authorizing in an annual year on capital, and what are you paying down on principal on capital. So it's like a mortgage in the house.
I'm going, since we're going to talk about that, I'm going to ask you, why don't you, we have an active seat, why don't you join us at the table?
Yeah.
Thank you.
This is
This is our financial advisor.
My name is Howard Mackey, I'm with MW Financial Group.
Okay, Howard, sit down, Howard, over here.
Nice to meet you.
So Howard, the only thing I did, and we have another copy?
good. This is mine.
I just,
Here. Just took one off, but, oh, here, it's right in front of you.
I put this together for all my clients, and it's just, it gives them a little bit of an ability to kind of stand back a little bit and look at, what have we done in the past 5 years as far as our principal borrowing, authorizations rather, and the principal payments. Where are we in total debt? You can see that over the 5-year average, we're just slightly higher in the amount that we're actually authorizing as to the amount that we're actually paying in principal.
What can you get from the glance that tells you in 13, 14, and 15, we paid back more than we authorized, 3 years in a row. Then in 16, 17, and 18, we are authorizing more than we're paying back. Now granted, 18 looks like, I'm sorry, 16 and 17.
We don't have it.
So, what does that tell you? Can you?
Yeah, I think, it just gives you the ability when you're looking at this from a debt service perspective, and I look at it
Hold on,
from
wait till everybody's ready.
I look at it from a budgetary perspective, really, and I'm looking at what you're paying in principal. So you know what you're paying roughly. You're roughly paying around 2.5 million, 2.4, and that's a consistent principal number. If you continually borrow more money, we know what's going to happen. At some point, we're going to have to finance it, and then the average principal payment will have to increase from 2.4 to whatever the number's going to be. So it just gives you a little bit of an idea as to where we're going in the future. Are we actually borrowing more money than we're paying off? Sooner or later, we're going to have to recast that and start to pay
So,
more.
Susan, what's the capital budget this year?
It was around, I think we ended 2.8.
No, that's 2.6.
No, it was around.
Are we earning any interest off any of these,
You
of
do.
this debt?
You are,
And
yeah.
how are we applying that interest?
That goes back into your budget as a line item of revenue.
Are we not paying off any principal from the interest earned?
We are paying principal off, and that's the amount that I'm showing as amount paid, and that's in your budget. It's in your operating budget as well.
I'm sorry, is it on one of these sheets?
Yeah, if you wanted to look at the principal, if you were to go to page, just to give you an idea,
Beautiful.
page 7,
Page 7.
And what are we investing in?
Susan,
Well,
New
we're-
Jersey Cash Management, right?
We
for the
have New
most part,
Jersey
yeah.
Cash Management.
You have to be very,
What we choose?
0.75% per
there
year.
are
You can
limitations
choose.
as to what you can and what you cannot invest in, but
Right,
there
but-
are strict regulations.
Okay.
No
Getting a
derivatives.
good
No
interest
derivatives.
We're getting good interest rate
No
from
interest
Valley
rate
though.
swaps.
They
No
don't-
swaps, no derivatives.
What's the,
You gotta make sure that, you know what?
Bitcoin?
That if something drastically happens, you're not gonna lose your money.
No, low risk.
No, low risk.
Diversified, low
Yeah.
risk.
Bitcoin, still,
No
it's another
Bitcoins.
option.
They're
No
low
Bitcoin.
everywhere.
yeah.
Thanks, council, we're gonna take
I
that
know.
into
Is there
advisement.
any ability at the moment to analyze that and see if we can earn any more interest on that?
Well,
or are we
Valley
pretty
called
conservative?
and said they were giving us 1.49, which is pretty good.
It's pretty good, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can shop around if you have
Yeah, why
extra
not?
money
Okay,
for
what is
CDs
the
or whatever.
what is the allowed instruments that we can use to invest?
Well, it's government-backed, government-backed
Depositories.
depositories and
Yeah.
and
They
investment.
do
How long? What's
resolution
the
and-
what's the average length?
Well, the maximum maturity allowed, is that what you want?
Yeah, what's the maximum
Yeah.
maturity? Because we can get through, government securities, they get up to 2% or so. That's why I'm asking, what's the maturity, what we gonna?
I don't know that there is a restriction on the maturity side. Generally what I've seen is typically in CDs or one-year instruments. I've never really seen anything beyond that. We can certainly pull a regulation on it, but again, it
It's
is
okay,
all
just-
secured in
Yeah,
investments.
one-year CDs are 1.34, that sucks.
Yeah, typically with most, I think the law in New Jersey is a typical investment in a government bank. I believe that you cannot go out past 1 year. And that's something I
Which
can
makes
check on.
Yeah,
All right.
Very low risk.
it is extremely, but, it's secure, so,
Is a CD a government backed considered?
it will be
No.
back, it depends if it's backed through the GUTPA, Governmental Deposit Protection Act.
That's not more
And
than,
that's really the
Yeah,
bank
yeah,
that's gonna
and
be backed,
and
yeah.
not more than
Yes.
250 per account, right?
FDIC is now 250, but GUTPA is gonna be larger than that, so, and those banks have to be part of the GUTPA community,
What is that for?
Governmental Unit
Governmental-
Protection Act.
Okay.
It's like the FDIC for you, for individual, there is something for the government.
Municipalities, okay.
Yeah, exactly, that's no big deal.
I just hadn't heard
Yeah.
that term.
Yeah, and they have to have a certain amount of deposits again on hand, and
Okay.
So I just-
And you guys are both comfortable, you and Susan are
I just
comfortable with
plotted this one, it's gonna be about, let's say,
It's hard to
2.7.
figure out what you could invest from our current fund right now, because most of it's for prepaid taxes and for the first and second quarters, and they're gonna be applied toward the taxes. And then what
yeah,
else?
yeah. So you've got to do a cash flow analysis.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult on the municipal side to figure out exactly what you can, and typically, again, it's going to be very conservative instruments. And the idea is not to lose taxpayers' money.
Well, yeah, but at the same time, you have massive payouts to the Board of Education.
You do. You
Which
do.
are scheduled
Right.
in advance, so it's not hard to plot, but you have to keep that in mind.
As far as the prepayment of the taxes, which was a large number, and I assume that's invested in earning interest somewhere.
Well, we already utilized the whole first quarter. Most people paid the first and second quarters. Plus, we're waiting to see how many people are gonna be asking for refunds. So it's not something that I can just invest, because I might need to either give it back and I need to apply it in the short term.
But the first and second quarter were
Yeah, but we only had
invested.
like 3, it's in our current fund, and I received a call from Valley National Bank that said that, I think I'm pretty sure it was 1.49% that we were earning, and even last year, if you looked at our revenue, it went up quite a bit because they raised our interest rate, but we don't know what will happen later this year. So that's why we didn't put in the revenue,
Invested long-term.
right.
So,
No.
Right, I was just wondering how we were applying any interest from the investment in terms of projections, because that's a significant amount of money, and even at 1.5%, it's gotta add up to a few bucks.
It does.
It did.
It does.
And it's shown if you look at our revenue on page 3,
yeah, I saw
you'll
it.
see interest on investments and deposits. And that was last year because our interest on our deposits went up. Now this year, we'll have a good amount of interest on what was prepaid to our last year.
And
for
we're
the
gonna
first
have
couple
more,
of
both the
quarters.
interest went up and the deposits went up.
Well, the deposits are gonna be applied to the taxes, but then
but the
we
interest
have
is the
interest
extra.
earned, there's interest earned on those deposits.
Right. Can I have one more question,
Sure.
please?
Yeah.
We're gonna approve the budget today.
No, we're not.
No, next week.
Just, if the moment we approve the budget, when can Susan certify that the funds are available?
We have to have it adopted.
Yeah.
So
So
we
that won't
adopt,
be until our April meeting, I guess.
That far out.
Right
Yeah,
now,
it's
we have a
April
temporary
12th.
budget.
What is
Yeah,
the?
so
Because
we-
the counties.
what's next meeting, Lisa?
Yeah.
The
Our next
20th.
meeting is the 20th, it's introduced on the 20th, it'll be heard for adoption.
That's a quick
April
question. The
17th.
interest on investments
And
and
on April
deposits,
17th,
budget is 70,000 going
Yes.
forward versus the 140 you
On the
achieved.
17th is the public comment.
I was just curious as to what that was based on.
We're just using a very conservative approach again on the revenue side, because it's gonna be part of the balancing act, that's gonna replenish my 2.1 that I used.
Got it.
20
Okay.
days to stop it.
Yeah, Deb
so
and I spoke about
just
that.
to go back,
Sure, Max.
on April 17th is the date when Susan can certify that the funds are available if we approve them on
Well,
March 20th.
what are you getting
No,
at funds available, for what
No, because
purpose?
it's certified, because if it's from.
If we want to go and purchase something that we approve in the budget.
Do it now.
She
You have a
can
temp-
do it
You have
right
a
now?
temporary budget, you have, you have funds certified that are available.
But what are
Yep.
we certifying?
That's going to be the next question.
Yeah, so,
You said that was your last question.
Yeah, but he's answering the question
yeah,
now.
no, Max, so just so
Yeah.
you understand, so what happens is on the very beginning, on January 1, when we have a reorg or 3rd, whatever that date
Yeah.
is, right? You do a temporary budget. That temporary budget lets you spend, pay payroll, pay expenditures.
What about the
everything.
capital
But
that we
it's
have?
only 26.25%.
So that's where I'm asking, if,
previous year's budget.
when can she certify that the funds are available in the capital budget?
Well, that's a
Until
different
they
story,
stop
because
opioids.
you need to introduce your bond ordinance, which I don't know when you're gonna do that.
Probably next March, what's
You could do
March?
it,
Next week.
No.
We're not gonna introduce the capital the same night?
you could do it on your
We need to
introduction.
appoint a bond counsel.
Well, is it he be appointed then too?
Well, he's saying something that on the
Go ahead, Max.
introduction.
So just generally speaking, so you understand, you
Oh.
can't spend on the capital until you do the ordinance. The ordinance has to be introduced, the ordinance has to be adopted, it has to be advertised, you have to have a hearing, and then you have a 20-day estoppel
Estoppel period.
period after adoption.
It's gonna be sometime in May
20 is
that you
for
can spend the
bond.
money from the
Right.
capital.
Okay.
Is that why,
Control
so
and adoption.
Jamie Cannon had asked to release funds for spring sports and it couldn't be done? Is that why?
Well,
This timing?
Right,
Anything
you have to
capital
wait.
cannot be
I
certified.
don't have money for something. We'll talk later.
Okay.
Capital or
they
operating?
have money.
Operating, and when can it be
Operating is
operating?
January 1.
So operating funds can be released instantly.
January 1, as long as if you're gonna release $10,000 for
Our
sports.
bill list, which we approve just about every meeting, is our operating budget.
Okay, so operating can be released instantly, capital sometimes in May.
Not sometimes. For us, it's been May consistently.
It's still sometimes in May.
Yeah,
Whatever the
typically,
May.
I think
Yeah.
you guys would think that it's gonna be
Yeah.
around mid-May.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
All right.
I have questions.
Sure.
So I would like to save for particular things that we know are coming in the future, big item purchases, such as a $1 million fire truck that the fire department has asked for. And what I would like to do is I'd like to have the funds taken out of surplus and moved into some sort of designated thing, and if we need them, we can always move them back. Is that the case? But how do I get something and have a little bit more investment on those funds so that we can earn
Raising the
for a
She's
particular,
suggesting
for a
that-
particular item?
That if we
Raising
want
the
to buy $1
operating
million, just an example, we want to buy $1 million truck in
In
2
3
years. Can we put a half or a third of that aside? This is what she's suggesting or asking. Can we put a half or a third of that aside each year so that it doesn't take a big hit that year?
The
But at
third
the
year.
same time, I think what you're asking also is, can we spend that money while we're saving it?
Or can we invest that money?
And I don't think either of these
No,
gentlemen
she's
want
not
to hear
saying
that.
spending, invest it.
Invest it.
You have to put it.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, you
listen,
invest it, any money.
Sure you can. Well, it's all fungible, okay? So basically, when we talk about we have money in reserve or fund balance, or whatever you want to call it, it's all cash, it's all fungible, it's all being invested every single day.
Before we worry about
Okay.
investing money, the question that I don't think is understood is, all right, so let's say we want to put aside $400,000 for that fire truck in 2 years. If we were to do that in 2018, where would it come from, and what does it do to our bottom line? Sure.
Come from tax dollars. So if you want to put $400,000 away a year for
In capital.
yeah. So what you have to do then
Yeah.
is you have to put a line item in your budget,
Budget
and
and
we're going
raise
to
it.
call it capital improvement fund. We're going to go from our $100,000 now to $500,000, and you'll have to raise $400,000 in
operating
taxes.
budget.
The problem
No,
is,
right,
I don't wanna, I don't wanna.
It's not in your capital.
Don't you say capital?
No, don't you have to raise it in the operating budget?
Yeah, that's what I said, yeah.
Yeah,
in the operating.
yeah.
So
Put it
if
in
I don't
capital.
wanna raise taxes, and I
that's why
wanna
you
use
don't
this
do-
surplus, how do I do that?
We know.
You can't
That's-
anticipate.
Well, the only other place you can leave the money is what we talked about is in total general surplus. So now I have $4.6 million sitting in surplus, okay?
But that's still operating. Can we use
That's not-
capital over multiple years to fund a purchase? That's the
No.
clear answer,
No.
question.
So other
No.
boroughs are doing this. So Jeff and I went to training last weekend.
Yeah.
And was it Milburn? The
Just
borough,
yeah, explain to me what you heard.
borough administrator from Milburn came up and did a whole lecture on this and said, we funded something over 7 years. And I raised my hand immediately and said, how'd you do that?
Well-
And he said exactly this. He said he earmarked funds out of the surplus to be a line item for, let's say, fire truck.
Which is what I just said.
100,000, 100,000,
But that's
100,000.
what I just
But
said.
the difference is that he actually did a little bit less conservative investment, and they earned interest. And he said in the 7th year they were able to not even have to take funds
Yeah, but it's still,
and use the
it's
interest
still
rate off
what
of it.
he's talking, it's operation, which
Yes.
means you put it on the operation.
We can do
We're
that
trying
now.
to do capital.
So
But
how
you
does that
either
affect?
raise your bottom line by you're spending more than $400,000 more, or you're gonna have to spend $400,000 less somewhere else, so it balances out.
If it's,
You know.
if it's operations, you immediately tax the people.
Right, so what he did, instead of leaving it in the surplus, so if you wanted to do 100 this year, let's just say that, right? So what you would say to me is, okay, we want to start $100,000 a year.
Yeah, on
Well,
like
I could,
6 different
I would
projects.
say to you, well, we could leave it in a surplus because it's in 4.6 million. That's dedicated for anything you want in the future. Or if you want to appropriate $100,000 of it, we'll add a line item, we'll call it capital improvement fund, future use, and we'll take $100,000 out of surplus and put it as a line item of revenue. So your surplus is going to go down, but then you'd have the 100,000 designated here. Or what we're doing is it's not in that designation, but it's all sitting back up in surplus.
But-
So it's either going to go like this. I mean, that's
But-
basically what
So-
you're doing.
And
The
taking
options,
the
how
money
does that
out
affect
of,
bottom
out
line?
of surplus, what does that do for our prospects for next year?
It just means that you have less security when you're talking about tax increase, because that money would be already earmarked.
Yeah,
So
and
surplus
everything
is
is
your fund
operation,
balance.
nothing is
Correct.
capital.
It's what you have. in
Only thing that's
fund
capital is the
balance,
bond
right?
ordinances.
I understand, but
So, and is no
You're
way
taking
we
it
can
away.
do
can't talk over.
Well,
a split in capital over multiple year for a
No.
He
purchase.
doesn't understand that you don't put it in
You
capital.
have to fund it, correct,
Yeah.
you have to fund it.
So-
Don't put it in capital.
Lauren, to answer that
Doesn't come
question,
from capital.
Milburn obviously,
Comes from-
for however they've done it, has more flexibility in their operating budget than we do.
It comes from.
You know, we could very
fund balance. It's the
easily
same
put $200,000
surplus from your
aside
operating budget.
if we could cut that $200,000 from somewhere else in the budget. But we choose not to, and I'm not saying Milburn is wrong, because they apparently have that flexibility.
It's a balancing act is what it is, really, that's all it
Yeah.
is, it's a balancing act. So you could do that if you really wanted to, but then we just know that whatever you decide that you're gonna earmark for capital, we just know that's not available for tax relief.
But would you recommend doing that versus bonding for a fire truck?
Well, I would never do it for a fire truck because,
Right.
let's just talk about globally again here, because now we're shifting
Just using
gears.
that as an example, so I
Right.
know it's coming.
You never want to really pay cash for an item
Absolutely.
that's going to last
20
20 years, because that makes no
Absolutely.
sense. Because
you
why would the person today pay for something that a person 20 years from down the road is going to benefit from, right?
Right.
But I know what you're saying, if we do a small improvement,
Let's say a green,
generator.
a green
or-
space, a
you-
playground.
Yeah, you could do
But
that,
you
you
could
could start to
use your-
build it in.
Folks,
They could use their capital
Yeah.
fund.
I would-
So what I'm saying is the
Yeah.
capital's invested right now very conservatively. Is there any option to take a tiny bit of out and give it a little bit more risk and see what we can earn on that?
That we're limited by state statute. And again, it's fungible, so whether you call, right now, you're calling it capital
Okay.
earmarked, or I'm calling it
Surplus.
just general
Okay.
fund surplus, all the cash is fungible, it all comes together in one sense, and it's all part of the same investment process.
I want to make sure of one thing. Does everybody here know that there's a capital fund balance and there's a surplus balance, which is our fund balance from our current fund?
Yeah, which is operation.
There's
Can
a
you just
difference.
explain? Okay.
I'd like to hear from our municipal finance advisor, because my goal is to
Okay.
finish by 7:30.
Yeah.
And we also, I don't know how
The
much of a
surplus is
discussion we're gonna
generated
have
from the
on
current
the
fund.
consent agenda.
Can
If any.
Susan just finish her answer?
The
Would you mind?
surplus is generated from the current fund.
Okay,
So when you guys are
versus
using the word capital and take it from capital, it's, the money that you want to raise would be raised in operating. So what Paul's saying is, you could take it from surplus, but then you're gonna have less surplus, you regenerate surplus, and then you have less surplus to anticipate in future years.
Next year is gonna be tough enough as it is.
That's what happens. Or if they have enough in capital improvement fund, then you could do smaller projects.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's.
But that's better for an emergency situation.
I think what you're really talking about is what you have to consider is the long-term plan. right?
Yeah.
So you just don't want to look at a snapshot or even 1 year. If you have a long-term plan that you're trying to attain, then I think you can do it. You may not do it every single year, and you may have to say, well, if our plan is to fund it and we put 100,000, are you happy
I think
with a $100 increase or whatever it is?
The best long-term plan we can come up with here, and that's what this committee is what I want to talk about, is to try and even out the things we want to buy, so that every year we have a flat level of capital requests. And, we don't try and buy a fire truck and a very expensive DPW truck in the same year, if we can spread it out from year to year. And if we know that in 10 years, we're gonna need another field, then we make sure that we don't wanna buy a fire truck that year. That's what we're talking about, I think, when we talk about financial planning here.
So there is no way of spreading a capital by over multiple years. That's
Well,
the
it
question.
is, that's exactly what we traditionally
We can
do.
choose to
When we
do
go
it
out
By
and bond, when we go out and bond, you pay back over a period of time. That's spreading it out
Based
over
on
the years.
useful
Yeah,
life.
but there is no way to
Roads are
allocate
long-term.
capital
Green space.
for a purchase over multiple years.
You need to do it in, what you're talking about is doing it in the operational
Oh,
budget.
It's only on the
We need to
operation.
earmark on the operational budget pieces of it as you go along. And you
But
could
in the
start to
capital,
factor
you
that in.
cannot do it.
No, because you need a funding source. So in the capital, the only funding source is either going to be through taxation, grants,
Okay,
or surplus
so,
funds
but
on the
for a second, if we do that, we say 400,000 and we go in bond. So you have the capital source. The next
Correct.
year, you do another 400,000 and you go in bond. You have the capital source.
But you would
So
never.
over the 3 years, I can do $1.2 million for one project, and I have the capital source already.
The only thing you need to do, though, whenever you're doing the capital side of it, you, again, if it's $1 million project, you need to authorize either the debt for the amount,
Yeah.
or you need to come up with a funding source that's already there.
Yeah, so we have
So if my funding
authorized the
source
debt.
is only the
Yeah,
first
but
400,000, then I have to authorize debt on the 600,000
We're
that remains.
already at $2.8 million at capital.
We understand.
So the question is, do you want to raise that to 3.2?
The question is, the question is, if we know that we're gonna have $1 million in 2 years or 3 years, let's plan over 3 years, all the capital.
Well, that's
Yeah,
what
we
but-
just said.
and if we have to, we authorize the debt over 2-3 years,
But don't you
and we
have to
get
authorize for
the
full
debt.
That's why I said.
and we bond over 2-3 years, which means we will pay additional interest over 2-3 years, but we don't get hit by $1 million
Correct.
in 1 year.
Which is what we've always done here, it's the
Yeah.
same thing.
You can't authorize part of the project, though.
We can bond for that,
Well,
we don't have to authorize.
Doesn't you have
But
to-
We can fund it over multiple years, which
Exactly.
we've always done here. So you're
Yeah.
just authorizing the ability to spend the money, and then how are you making the payments? You could either through permanent debt, you could do it over 10 years on notes, and that's typically what happens in every municipality. You authorize
Including
debt,
yours.
authorize debt, including yours, till we get to the point where we have a natural drop-off in our permanent debt, and we have a large enough a number that's unfunded, meaning that it's in notes or unfunded projects. And then we go to the permanent financing side, which is what we just did last year. And then we spread that out over.
What I don't
over
think is
the period.
appreciated is before this stuff gets to mayor and council, it's our CFO and our auditor that work to put this together. You know, the first draft of our capital didn't just fall out of the sky. It was prepared for us, and we made minor changes, but basically you've been doing this,
Yeah.
as, you know, so I would really like to move along because we're gonna run out of time.
So Howard's
I
here.
have more questions, but I'll let Howard go and then I'll.
Okay, he's just gonna give you a general overview of
the
municipal
market, sure.
bond market, yeah.
Yeah, sure, thank you. I'm sure most of you've seen a lot of the headlines, so you probably have some idea in terms of where interest rates are going. They're going up. Typically, and when you have a strong economy, which we seem to have, a couple of things happen. Stock market will tend to do well because earnings are improving. The general economy is improving. People buy stock. The other thing that happens is the bond market will tend to deteriorate. And what that basically means is the prices go down, but interest rates go up. And so we're in an environment right now where the interest rate picture has been somewhat bleak ever since quantitative easing has stopped, and now the Fed has started the tightening process. And just to give you some idea in terms of where rates are, I think if you look at the financings that we did in April of 2017, the 10-year, what we call the municipal bond, AAA municipal bond index was at 214. Okay, today is at 251. So we're talking 37 basis points. So that's quite a shift. It's been back in 2000, I think it was July of 2016. The rate had been 131. So we've seen rates go from 131 to 251 in the course of just under 2 years. And what we envision is a continuing climb of interest rates during that period of time. One thing, and I won't take a lot of time here, but one thing I think might be important for this body to understand is that when we did your financing back in April, one of the things that you were able to do, which is put you in a very good position, is that you were able to do bond financing as what we call a bank qualified bond. And a bank qualified bond is one that's issued by a municipality in an increment of $10 million or less in any calendar year. And the benefit of that is that banks can buy this bond and take advantage of the interest rate, tax-free interest rate, and they also can finance the purchase of the bond through their borrowed money, their deposits. So they get really a dual tax benefit for buying a bank qualified bond, and as a result, the interest rates on a bank qualified bond tend to be about 10 basis points lower, anywhere from 6 or 7 basis points within the first 5 years, out to about 10 or 12 when you get to 10 to 15 years out. Tenafly was in a position to take advantage of that last April when we went out for competitive bidding, and we got rates that were really very strong. When we look at how a AAA rated bond would trade in New Jersey, particularly a smaller issuer, they typically, Bergen County, in 10 years would trade about 10 to 12 basis points higher than the AAA MMD index. When Tenafly went to market, their 10-year bond was 6 basis points higher than the index, so you actually had a better trading rate than the county. And the county also has a AAA rating. And that's not untypical sometimes because it's also a reflection of the scarcity of issuance, so you're not frequent issuers. That means that when bond funds, particularly New Jersey bond funds, are looking to diversify, they will pay up or pay an additional premium, i.e. a lower interest rate, to get a bond from Tenafly or a particular county that does not issue very often. And so, and at this particular point, you're in fairly good shape, I think, in terms of the way, thanks to a great extent to your auditor and to Susan, you run a very tight ship. And when you look at certain metrics like your assessed valuation to your tax rate and that kind of thing, you have a very comfortable position in terms of your AAA rating, which I don't see being in jeopardy.
I just want to add one thing, Howard. You know, our surplus number is above that 15, 16% of total expenditures. So, and that's key for AAA. So, you know, when we are getting rated, certainly one of the parameters I've seen, and I think it was S&P that's actually putting the document out, you know, as part of calculations to how you fall into this possible AAA rating. They want to see communities that have surplus that are above 15% of your total budgetary expenditures. And we're there.
So the value of that AAA rating is significant.
Absolutely.
Well, it is, yeah. I would
Absolutely.
say in today's market, because your next ratchet down would be a AA rating or a AA plus rating, and the difference is probably about 12 to 15 basis points.
Well, I appreciate you passing on the laurels to Susan and our auditor, because I agree with you. I think they do a heck of a job.
Well, I mean, I'm impressed with the budget.
We're in good shape, and we, you know, the payback is very accelerated as well. So, you know, our debt is probably being paid back way quicker than what the average would be out there. Yeah, we did a 10-year.
I think our rate was 2.06.
2.06,
Yeah.
I remember there was
So-
6.
Plus a buyback we got some,
So
whatever.
it's an aggressive payback, so we're gonna, you know, pay that principal down quick.
You ended up refunding some of your notes and that type of thing, so
Yeah,
you
that was
actually
pretty-
got lower rates because of the interest rate period.
Yeah, financially great shape. I mean, you know, when you look at it from that perspective too.
Any questions for our financial advisor?
I have a question. So, does our municipal rate take into account anything on the school side, or is it just the municipality?
Well, it's really it's a good question. The Board of Ed has its own rating, okay?
It's separate from ours?
Yes, and because it's a tax district in itself. But in reality, when an investor would look at your credit, they're gonna also look at your total expenditures and expenses and your obligations, and that, to not direct way, but somewhat indirect way, is gonna be impacted by your school expenses.
But overall, it's a great community, I mean,
Oh, yeah.
from a bond rating perspective.
Well,
They love the
there's
debt.
there's some queasiness because there's some issues with their budget this year. But I think the
But
most
overall
important,
speaking,
the
yeah.
most important, the most important thing is that everybody at the table has a sense that it's two separate entities, really.
Oh, yeah, well, and the market does.
The fact that we have a AAA, they may not have, in fact, I'm
Yeah, I think
convinced they probably don't have a AAA.
I don't believe they do. I think they're double A.
Yeah, I don't think they are either. Yeah.
Well, we can see the fact that we are able to do 0, and they cannot struggle if they struggle to
Well,
2%.
don't say it too loud, because who knows what will happen next year.
Well, we did 0.
Right.
That's it.
If they use capital bank for next year and raise the taxes, how does that affect our bond rating or any of
doesn't
that?
affect us.
Doesn't affect us?
No.
Okay, Lauren, if there's anything else you want, I'd like to move on to the consent agenda, and then,
There's only consent agenda.
Can you give us a second?
Just leave this here.
Okay.
Okay, well,
I think we're good.
okay, I'm happy to
I'm
see
gonna
if you
call
need
you,
it.
I'm just gonna call you to understand the process of bonding over 3 years.
Yeah.
And how we can do that.
Call me in the office.
I'll do that, thank you.
I'll just pass a couple of cards around.
And give me another
Everybody
card
that needs
of
to reach me,
yours,
so
please.
you certainly knows how to reach
If you
me.
don't have.
Thank you very much.
No worries.
Howard, thank you.
Okay, no problem.
I'll
Any
entertain a-
questions, don't
I'll
don't
drive Susan
hesitate.
crazy first, don't worry.
Yeah, or you can call me too, it's fine.
Okay.
You know, just want to make sure you're comfortable and you understand, you're new with the process.
I just feel that when we want to do an improvement in our town, when these large sums come up, such as,
Yes.
a green space or
Yep.
a new playground or a new field, whatever it
Yep.
is, and these large items come and we have nothing saved for that or nothing pocketed away, it's very, the public hears these large
Becomes
numbers
painful.
and
Becomes painful.
it really becomes a
That's
very
a plan.
difficult
Well,
thing to create and plan in town.
Right, but you're paying it over multiple years too,
Years.
so you got to factor that in as well. So if it's, you're going to pay it over a 10-year. I mean, the last bond sale we did, we paid it over a 10-year principal.
No, but, there are certain principles that are the same all over.
Absolutely.
I want to buy an expensive car, I can save up for it, but where do I get the money to save up for it? I have to
Comes out of your
Scrimp-
current operations,
scrimp
right? Your
in
current,
other
your current
areas.
year of,
That's all. It's the same thing.
Same, it is.
I have one more
Yeah, go
question.
ahead.
So after hearing Howard talk, is there any amount that we can remove from surplus and still retain a AAA?
Well,
Like,
listen,
what is the
again,
numbers?
as a general rule, what they're saying is, and it's not in stone, but as a general rule,
More surplus.
they're looking at AAA communities. One aspect of it is on the finance side. One aspect in the finance side, but is surplus,
Is it
and they'd like to
15%?
see at least 15% surplus of your total operating budget.
What is our percentage now?
We're over 15. I didn't do the math on
But
it.
Like if we're 25.
Lauren, my concern is you remove it this year and remain at 15%, that's fine. But you may end up in a situation next year where you can't prevent going under 15%. You look at what Englewood is
We can
going
look
through
at the
now
numbers.
Yeah.
because of surplus issues.
We can-
So, Mayor, from what I understand though, at any time, you can take that money that you've moved in a line item and put it back and not use it, right? And doesn't that go back to surplus if you
Well,
don't use it
after
that
2
year?
years, right, after
Well,
the
I'm not
budget.
quite
so-
sure.
Can you do it
I'm not
within
sure.
1 year? So
Well,
let's
so when
say,
does it lapse?
So let's say we
The
have
only-
that
the only
situation.
reason- The reason
We
I'm
can't-
giving you a hard time about it
No,
is
I
because
wanna understand.
I
Yeah.
have, having worked with Susan and her predecessor and our auditors, I appreciate the fact that if we have flexibility in our surplus, they'll tell us. They're not trying to prevent us from doing what we need to do.
Of course,
You know,
I'm not
and they're
opposed
in a whole bunch of, he's in how many communities here?
Right, you don't have to
35
convince me
or
of their
something.
skills, I'm trying to
So,
understand
no, I
how.
understand, but
options.
basically, I'm confident that they will say, you know what, we got a little extra money in surplus, and I don't hear that this year. And I'm very concerned about where we're gonna be next year, because before I heard what he said today, I just know, it's, every year, these years are connected. Thank you.
We have to do it ourselves.
A motion to approve the consent agenda? Well,
Yes,
we can discuss after a motion and a second, please.
Second.
Second.
Is there some discussion?
There is discussion. I have.
All right, good night.
Thank you.
Yes,
night.
yes,
Good
good
night.
night.
So I think Max, you asked this actually to Lizette, but didn't we say we were gonna lease this?
No, that's,
That's a different one.
no,
So
that's.
can't we, did I,
That was 2018. This is
Did I write
from
you-
last year.
did you write back? I missed it, I'm sorry.
She did.
So the response when I wrote, so can't we also lease this one?
We can't do leasing right now, because first of all, we didn't find a good leasing program that needs to be investigated.
No.
And this
And
has to be
this
done right
was,
now?
we found capital money that Walden did not use.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this deal ends March 25th, did he say?
15.
Alden is
15.
here. Alden is
Oh,
here.
Walden,
So there's,
Walden, when did, if you don't get this car in,
Prius.
you can't get this.
You
understand?
cannot use it for a Prius for that.
The
That has to
state
be
contracts
It has to be an SUV,
are
and
up
the SUV is on.
either the middle of the, yeah, the 15th.
So
On the 15th of the
So
month.
No,
we
you
would not be
cannot
able to
amend
go
that.
for a state
cannot
contract.
amend.
You'd have to go out to bid. The state contracts do not start to get issued until the end of summer again.
okay.
And this was
Still
17
trying to
That's
figure
always
out-
a
So
problem
we're
every year because the budget
Yes.
gets decided later than when the contracts get cut off.
So-
I'd like this to be the last large gas guzzling SUV we
Absolutely,
purchase.
So-
absolutely.
The SUVs are in capital, passenger cars are in operating. The leases that we found are, you could defer the payment, so let's say you find a hybrid, you could start to look into the leasing, and it would have to be a deferred amount that you could start a year later.
Well,
Okay.
Susan, at your leisure,
Okay.
let the councilman, Max and Lauren know what due diligence they can do so that we get ahead of the curve, and it's not at the last minute that we're trying to find a hybrid.
No,
It
Susan,
doesn't sound to, it doesn't make sense to me that in this day and age, that we can't find a hybrid. It just doesn't. it
Well,
doesn't compute.
we could look online into the purchase of
And
property, there aren't any?
hybrids.
There's
Wait,
no hybrids?
Back around 2004, 2005, when I started in local government, there were hybrids, and that's how we have the two escapes, but there was also a credit program. Once that credit program dried up,
They stopped
hybrids are
purchasing.
no
Well, we
longer
need to
available. But
speak-
state contracts are, right now, a bunch of them are expiring this year and next year, so with a different administration, there'll be.
We need to
different
speak to our
specs.
representatives and let them know that this is something we're interested in.
Okay.
All right, I'd like to call the question, please.
Okay.
Consent agenda. Call the roll, please.
Sure. Councilmember Dash?
yeah,
Councilmember Dayton?
Yes.
Councilmember Grossman?
Yes.
Councilmember Parker?
Motion to adjourn?
well, before we adjourn, I just want to say that the financial board met last Tuesday or Wednesday when it was after the snow. And one thing I want to make sure that we understand, every large purchase before it gets either requested or sold, we like to have, so the financial board can look like the ambulance, the big trucks and stuff like that, at least to understand what, because that's what the role is.
Well, I would urge you to go to the budget book, and most of these capital
Yeah.
requests are spaced out. And then speak with Susan,
Yeah.
and Susan, make sure that all of our department heads are aware of the fact that we're studying this,
Okay,
and that they give us a sense of what they're gonna want over the next few years.
done.
Well, I could
Especially
probably
DPW.
list what's 19, 20, 20, compile it together,
Mhm.
because right now you only have 18 compiled.
Yeah.
I could look at what they did and make a master
Perfect,
list.
that's exactly what we need.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
When and where did this finance committee meet?
There was advertising, and it was supposed to
It was
meet
public notice.
Tuesday, but it was snow, and we had to meet on Wednesday, last
Wednesday
Tuesday.
and Thursday.
And we will advertise again
Where
in
did you meet?
Right
here.
Okay.
Right here.
No, as long as it was advertised, because I
Yeah.
was unaware of it.
No, it was
Just wanna make sure it's done
Website,
properly.
It was advertised on the
Well,
website.
who was at this meeting?
Mark and the people that are here, they're part of the
Mark who?
Mark Zina, Adam, Vinu, and Alex. And I was there.
Yes.
Lauren could not make it.
So you were the only member of the council?
I was the only member of the council.
Okay, motion to adjourn?
Jordan,
All in favor?
so moved.
Thank you very much for getting this done in a timely